Hello there, I'm Phil Williams and I would like to welcome you to Audio Angling, the podcast site of fishingfilmsandfacts.co.uk. For this interview I'm sat in the wheelhouse of the trawler Jacinta, berthed at Fleetwood's old fish quay. Jacinta has recently been restored as a working museum demonstration of what life was like aboard one of the large deep water trawlers, hence the background noise. And with me today is Frank B, a member of the group responsible for that restoration. A poacher turned gamekeeper in some respects, who now at the age of 86 has spent many years working within the fishing industry, including time spent at sea both on the Icelandic runs and inshore. Knowledge he used to develop Fleetwood and Morecambe Bay into one of the country's premier charter boat fishing venues, a reputation that unfortunately has since slipped, before downsizing and moving into dinghy fishing, where prior to becoming a founding member of the Wyre Boat Angling Club, guided Mark Miller to the North West best ever cod of 42 pounds, a fish that surely will never be bettered. Frank, here we are sat in the wheelhouse of Jacinta where it's warm and dry, but tell us what it was really like to work at sea back then, and how that ultimately led to your charter fishing days aboard Viking, and later to the small boat fishing too.
How I got involved in the inshore fishing, it was in the 30s. We used to help when the prawners used to come in on the beach and at the north end at Fleetwood. We used to help them to get the baskets of prawns and shrimps and fish up, I suppose, onto their cart, because we didn't have lorries in those days, and we used to push the cart to Wyre Fisherman's headquarters in Victoria Street at Fleetwood, and all the prawns would all be picked by, we did about 60-70 women working upstairs and downstairs in the shop, and they would pick the prawns, and it kept a lot of people in work in those days. You could go to the shop and get mat bags of prawns and shrimps and carry them home and put them on the old wooden tables in those days and pick them. And I used to have my mother and my grandma and two brothers, and when we used to come home from school we used to work for at least an hour before we could go out and play, because we had to do this. Money was short in those days, and that was the start of me getting involved in the fishing industry, I suppose, because when I left school I went on I joined one of the ships, and the chap I sailed with was a chap called Harry Salthouse, and the ship was called the White Heather. I was 14-year-old, and we was going out. I remember this so distinctly. We was going out early one morning about 6 o'clock in summertime, which was daylight, and I was stood in the hold with my hands in my pockets, and I was whistling away, and the door opened in the wheelhouse and a hand came out, and Harry Salthouse said, "You can knock that whistling off. We get enough wind without you whistling for wind." And from that I have never ever whistled on a ship, and I spent 4 years in the Navy, my fishing time at Fleetwood, my inshore time, and I've never ever whistled on a ship since. I think I learned a lesson that day, but that's the superstitions of the old fisherman, because he started his career as in the smack job at Fleetwood, which was under sail, which was very hard work. And then the chap who owned the White Heather, called Jackie Martin, he had a ship called the Llewellyn, and I sailed with Jackie for 3 or 4 years, and that was the start of my career in the inshore fishing industry. I served about 4 or 5 years doing that, and then I went sea netting for 12 months or so, and I did a few trips in the very early 50s. I did a few trips deep sea fishing. Swallowed the anchor, and in 1948 I married a girl from London. She came up here, and I suddenly decided I'd had enough of fishing. I'm going down to London. So she said, good idea. So we went down to London, and I saw an advert in the Evening Standard for blockmen, as they call them, what we call up here filleters. I got this job in Billingsgate Market. After about 18 years I suddenly said, shall we go back to Fleetwood? So she wasn't too particularly keen with being a Londoner, but when she abided by my wishes, and I came back to Fleetwood, and first thing I did, I went back fishing for about 12 months, and then I packed that in, bought myself a little van. I started a fish round in Blackpool, and I finished that after 25 years. The last 25 years of my working life was involved in selling fish to people to friends, not customers, to friends in Blackpool.
What about your time when you went on the Icelandic runs, and also then you got into the charter skippering?
Well, I did in the 50s. I did 3 trips to sea, but I wasn't impressed with it.
What was it like up at Iceland?
Well, it was like it always is up there. If it's nice weather, it's not so bad. But when it's rough, it's not too good really. But well, we had to do it. It was a job. I mean, I wasn't the only one that was doing it. There was hundreds and hundreds of people fishing up there in those days, up until the Cod War anyway. And I suppose when you think about the Cod War, it's the less said about that the better. When I started my fish round, within 6 months, I've always played about in boats. Even when I was down in London, I always had the boats on the beach at either Hastings or Folkestone. I had a 14-foot boat built, which I used to go angling in, me and a pal of mine. And we had that on a stayed on Hastings Beach. And I suggested to him that we get a bigger boat, so we went and ordered a 20-footer from a chap in Rye, Harry Phillips, a very old boat builder, and he built us this boat in the late 50s. It was 20 foot, she had about a 6-foot beam, 7-foot beam. She was elm on oak, and he put a 2-cylinder Lister diesel in it, and we used to go all over the Hastings with that. And then a pal of mine got me a mooring in Folkestone Harbour. Anyway, when I came back to Fleetwood and I started my fish round off, I thought, with the experience of my inshore days when we used to fish for skate and plaice in Morecambe Bay, or the upper reaches of Morecambe Bay, the experience of lining that we used to line for ochre in my inshore days. So I bought a boat and started angling and made quite a success of it. I had 4 boats altogether, and the last one was she used to be a lifeboat on one of the P&O boats that was scrapped, and I paid £1,000 for it, fitted it out, put another engine in, and started chartering, and I think I made a success of it. I enjoyed it because I was getting paid to do something that I enjoyed doing myself, because I did a little bit of fishing myself as well, so I was paid for something that I really did enjoy. And I did that for about 20 years, and then as you get older, I was getting into my early 70s then, I decided to call it a day chartering, and I bought a small boat, and I was a founder member of the Wyre Boat Angling Club, and I did that for a few years, and up until the present day.
And you're still fishing?
Still fishing, not so much though. It knackered me that day, it really did.
Yeah, but it's still there. You were still got like a sea.
I've still got my rods and my reels, and I still want to. It's there bodily, but it's
That boat of yours, that was it V2?
Yeah.
The dinghy?
Yeah.
Has the cod record yet for the North West?
That's right, it has. Yeah.
£42.
Yes, it does.
Some fish.
Nice fish.
Yeah, I bet it was.
Yeah, that was a nice fish, was that. And consider the lad, young Mark, I think he was only about 14 and a half then. He said, "Will you take me fishing one day?" I said, "Of course I will." It was a distant relative of mine, and so he didn't have any gear, so I fitted him up with a rod and reel and put a trace on for him, and lo and behold, up comes a £42 cod, which is the North West record, and I don't think it'll ever be broken. I'm sure it will.
No, there's no chance, is there?
No.
Those days are gone.
No.
Long gone. What was that, the late 70s, early 80s?
We formed the Wyre Boat Angling Club in 1982, and it was about 2 or 3 years before that.
Yeah.
Very late 70s, yeah.
But what happened that brought all those cod on like that? We had these bumper years where, year on year, you didn't have a lot of fish. But
I think, like I've said to you before, Phil, I think that it's a cycle that these fish go through. Even now, we're having bad years of cod, but then another couple of years, and you're back where you started from. Not with the big cod, not so much the big cod, but we're still getting 3, 4, and 5 pounders. And many times I've seen boats coming in with 20, 30, 40 fish sometimes, but like last year there wasn't many about. Now what this year's going to bring, I believe some of the caught a 5 pounder and dropped it on and tried to net it, but he lost it. And we're only into October now, and that's early for cod. I mean, we usually start getting them about November time. You get the 3, 4 and 5 pounders, and then get towards Christmas you get the 8s and 10s, and then into January and February, them's the best 2 months for the big cod. From my experience, the fishing for big cod is always in January and February, £20 plus.
Well, those years are gone, I think, when we had all those big fish.
Like I say, Phil, it's a cycle that fish goes through. I mean, look at other types of fish. Take the plaice, for instance. You get good years at plaice fishing, and now plaice fishing, that's another little story. In my inshore days, I served on the Llewellyn for 2 or 3 years, and then I joined Dick Wilson, a very, very old, good inshore fisherman was Dick. He had a boat called the Lassie. Now when the plaice come in May time in Morecambe Bay, we used to fish it right the way through until get towards the end of October and November. Once you start getting the cold nights, the plaice take off and they migrate south. The inshore lads at Fleetwood used to take the ships down to fish out of Mostyn in North Wales on the river.
It's on the Dee, isn't it?
The Dee, the River Dee. Or we would tie up at the quay in Rill, and we'd fish the Constable Bank for plaice, and we'd spend 10 weeks down there and come back just before Christmas, catching lots and lots of plaice. The migration of plaice, as they migrated south, you see, they'd left Morecambe Bay and they was down off the Constable Bank in North Wales.
Well, I'm sure that these cycles of cod are right, but the thing is that there's that much commercial pressure these days. I don't think the fish are going to get back to those sort of sizes again.
Yeah, but when you talk about that, Phil, you take Fleetwood for instance. Commercially, what have we got left? You've got about 10 boats. You've got 2 or 3 that go out for 3 or 4 days. The rest of what we call tide, they go out at say our water's 3 o'clock in the morning. They go out with the ebb and they come back in the afternoon with the flood, and they get a day's pay. But commercially, we've got nothing at Fleetwood, and it's the same all over. I was talking to a pal of mine at Folkestone. Now Folkestone used to have at least 8 fishing boats, inshore boats. They've got none now. Folkestone is absolutely void of commercial fishing boats. Why, I don't know. I know at Hastings they used to launch the boats from the beach, and they've still got a few boats still fishing from the beach at Hastings.
What about the thornbacks up here? What do you think of the situation of the thornbacks?
Well, I mean, in my time chartering, I caught a lot of thornbacks. I really did, hundreds and hundreds over the years. Well, I suppose in 1 year I had 860 in 1 year, because you used to keep a check on how many I caught each time. I was only doing 4 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Saturday and Sunday chartering, and there's many times you couldn't get out for weather, but when we did, we always got plenty of roker. And I remember in one particular year that I had 860 1 year on the Viking, and all of a sudden the roker have gone somehow. They're getting just the odd few on the north side of Loon where we used to go lining and catching lots and lots of roker, and all of a sudden the roker start to take off, or they don't come. My own theory of this, and I don't think I'm far wrong here, they built the Easham power station, the nuclear power station at Easham, I can't remember, I think it was in the 60s sometime, and they use a lot of hot water they release on the ebb. That water, it goes on to the north side of Loon, because strange it may seem, in Morecambe Bay we have 2 tides. On the north side of Loon, if you draw a line from Loon Buoy towards Easham, on the north side of that the tide ebbs off to a northwest, and on the south side of that of Loon, it ebbs off to a southwest, so you've got 2 different tides. And I think that water, that the millions and millions of gallons of warm water which they release, I say about 2 hours ebb, it seems to filter onto the north side of Loon, and it's absolutely killed the roker fishing. That's only my opinion. But on saying that in my chartering days we got very, very few bass. If you was lucky you'd get the odd one now and again. But now they're catching, in the summertime when they go bass fishing, they're getting small ones up to 4 or 5 pounders, 20, 30, 40 and 50 at a time sometimes. But now recently, this last month, they've been getting fish up to 8 and 10 pounders, and they're getting 20, 30, and to get a 10-pound bass is quite an achievement in any angler's lifetime.
So, what are your thoughts on the way the fishing's gone at Fleetwood over the last few years? What do you think is responsible for the way it is now? Give us an oversight.
You mean commercial fishing or
rod and line fishing?
Rod and line fishing. Well, we're still getting the smaller fish like the dabs and plaice. You're still getting those, and hopefully in winter you're still getting the whitings and the cod. But like I said before, I think that we have cycles of these things. Take the big cod for instance, like in the early 80s, late 70s, we was getting cod like over 30 pound. Not many of them, but there was once a day you'd have a 20 odd in the late 20s coming, not on a regular basis, but you'd have one showing here and one showing there. And all of a sudden we had a year where we didn't get any. We've had a few years actually where we didn't get any big cod into the late teens. There was all 3, 4 and 5 pounders, occasionally 8, and we had that for a couple of years. And then there was a year that they started to get a couple of 20s popped up. And I feel sure even now that the big ones will come back at some time or other, because it's a cycle that fish go through.
But in those days of the late 70s, early 80s, there weren't a lot of fish about. You'd go out and you might not get many bites over the day, but what you did get, you would hopefully have a big one amongst them.
Yeah.
And they were fairly regularly caught. You had this expectation of catching something over 20. You didn't always get it,
no,
but you had the expectation that you would.
That's right.
And that seemed to slip away in the mid 80s, and it seemed to slip into cycles of smaller fish. You was always hoping they'd come back, but they never really seemed to come back.
No.
Why are they not come back in the intervening years? Is that commercial pressure, part of its natural cycle?
I don't think it's commercial pressure, because we don't have the ships that fish. I mean, before the war at Fleetwood, we had 120 ships coming and going 2 tides a day, and the dock was always full of ships, and a lot of them used to fish the bay, what we call bay fishing, Morecambe Bay and into the Irish Sea. All those ships have gone. We haven't got any ships now. The only inshore boats that we've got that's fishing it like is the inshore boats, and we've only got about three big ones like 50-60 footers, and the rest are all from 20 to 30 foot. They only go tided, like we call tiding, with the 12-hour tide, go out on the ebb and come back on the flood. And they're not catching the fish. They still get a living. They must get a living, otherwise they won't do it. But they're not getting when you're talking about the big cod. We only used to catch the big cod off Rossall side from Kingscoy down to the Gin, and that's the rough ground. All that ground is all, for a distance of 2.5 miles, is all rough ground. Even the inshore trawlers can't tow on it. They can these days because of the system that they've got, the fishing gear they've got. They can tow on rough ground now using bobbins and things like that. But in the old days, I know of 2 or 3 blokes that's tried to fish on the north side of the Loon, and they ripped the net to pieces. So they did it once, they didn't do it anymore.
Is the pressure not coming from elsewhere though, from further afield? Pressure in as much as it's not allowing the fish to grow through to these large sizes, it's cropping them off all the time? I
don't think so. Not really, no, because I mean the Irish Sea is a big area, and when you look at it from the North Channel down to St George's Channel, you're talking about perhaps 180, 200 miles. No, I don't think it's overfishing, because we haven't got the ships. Even the Scotchmen, their ships have all been decommissioned. I mean, you try and work out from Fleetwood, go north and then go south, the number of fishing ports where there is commercial fishing done. Even Whitehaven is not like it used to be. I mean, I can remember Whitehaven when the 20 or 30 sea netters working. Well, they're not there now. They might have 1 or 2, but they're not like they used to have. And it's the same going south. What fishing port have you got between here and you've got Milford Haven, and that's about the only one south of Fleetwood.
So hopefully it is a cycle of these things may well come back.
Exactly, I think they will do. I've always said this, that we get good years of cod, and we've had our good years. Mind you, I must confess, on the first good years in the early 80s, late 70s, they was good. I mean, nearly every boat had into the teens of pounds of fish, in size I'm talking about, and the odd 20 here and there, but there was a break of about 6 or 7 years, and then there was a spell of 1 or 2 boats did get the odd 20, 18s and 20s, but there wasn't many of them. But recently we've only had the small ones, like 3, 4, 5, 6 pounders, the occasional 7 or 8, but it was occasionally. But well, I'm saying I hope they come back. I hope they come back for the anglers good, because it's good for fishing.
Going back a little bit further in time, you was commercial fishing, you was inshore fishing, you was doing your fish rounds obviously, and then you went into the charter side of things. What was charter fishing like when you first went into it? How basic was it coming out to Fleetwood?
Well, it was a very successful time in my early years as chartering for the first 8 or 10 years, and we did a lot with Roker, and we didn't so much bother about. We went round to Rossall, and it was a time where we was going like 8 pounder was as big as you got in those days. It was in the late 70s and very early 80s that we was getting the big cod, the 20s and 30s, you know. Friends of yours have caught 20s and 30s.
Yeah. You started off when there was it birds?
Birds and Mudlead Bay, yeah.
Yeah.
Birdie had about 3 boats and Mudlead Bay had 1. And there was the sole charting in those days.
And what was that like?
Without criticising them, it's Charlie, I suppose, used to fill his boat up with 40 anglers, and if you can imagine 40 anglers on a boat, especially the size of the Wyre Angler, I mean, she was a big fine boat, but he was fishing over the sand, somebody was fishing over his shoulder. There was that many anglers. I mean, it was part of his business, I suppose, to fill his ship up with anglers.
Of course.
And they never used to go where we used to go.
Or did they get to the end of the channel and that sort of thing?
Or you get to the prawn boy, or they might go to the dumper, because there's always good fishing at the dumper for dabs and plaice and things like that.
And when you started up, you actually wanted to go further afield and develop what was going on in Morecambe Bay.
Yeah. My experience as an inshore fisherman and line fishing for Roker in those days. I mean, we used to shoot 200 ducks and you'd have 70 or 80 Roker, various places on, from way past the rough ground, the other side of Lightning Knoll, and the halfway buoy to the north of that, off the Barra coast. They have a rough ground all the way right up to what we call the North West corner, which is the top end of Walney. We used to fish up there, and we used to line up there as well. Well, I've lined for Roker right up north side of Lightning Knoll, or Gazoon as we called it, and then just on the north side of Loon. And we've always been successful, always been plenty of Roker and chartering, always. You could guarantee, you could say we'll get 20 to 25 fish, and you would do.
Always on the smaller tides?
No, not on small tides. Now that's a different story. The best tides I found for Roker in my time was a 25, 26, 27 foot tide. Above that, you can't hold bottom. You know, I don't have to tell you that, you know what it's like at the tide. I mean, when you get the 30 foot tides, you've got no chance of fishing for Roker on the north side of the Loon. Only fishing about 3.5 hours to 4 hours ebb as the tide started to ease down to low water, and then it had flooded for about 2.5 hours, and then you had to pack up.
What was the best Roker that you had on the boat anyway? Because I did hear rumours that you had one into the 30s.
I had one at 32 pound 4 ounces.
Wow, that's some fish.
It was a good fish.
I mean, the record in those days was 38 pounds, but that was then thrown out.
It was classed as a blonde Roker. Somebody did, I don't know why. I mean, it was a chap, I think, down south somewhere.
Yeah.
It was a chap down south in, I think, 1936.
Yeah, it was going back some time.
Went fishing off the Lamps and Rustington round that way.
I can't remember the exact details,
and,
but it was
£36, but it was classed as a thrown-back record for lots and lots of years. And then all of a sudden it was thrown out for some whatever reason, I don't know. The NFSA wouldn't accept it.
And that fish of yours could well have filled that slot had you known at the time, but you didn't know at the time.
I didn't know. In fact, I gave it away. I used to do an angling club from Crewe that used to work for the British Railways, and I took these lads out and was fishing on at the dumper. There was some good Roker fishing there at the dumper, just north of the dump, there's a little fishing area what we used to use it commercially called Bog Hole, and you could it was like a dip in the seabed, and it covered an area of about a mile and a half. And if you wasn't careful, you got in there commercially, and you couldn't get out until the tide flooded next tide. You know, you were safe enough, but we used to get some big roke there, real big ones. I remember one day going out on my own, and I'd only 3 roke. One was 14, one was 16, and one was 18. Just 3 fish. I was telling you, just north of the dumper, boy.
Yeah. What about the plaice fishing in the bay as well? Because it was always noted as a good place.
Always good plaice fishing in Morecambe Bay, if you know where the right spots were, because Morecambe Bay is sand in a lot of areas, but there's a lot of rough ground, like there is at Rossall, especially from north side of Loon, like level with Loon Boy and Patch Boy. From there north, it's all rough ground. I mean, I've known a couple of inshore lads try and shoot the gear there, and they come unstuck, got fast, or he ripped the nets, you know, so they never tried it anymore.
And what was the quality of the fish on rod and line like?
Always good, always. I mean, even dabs and plaice, you can always catch them if you fish for them. I mean, don't forget when we was fishing for Orca, we had the big hooks on.
Yeah, of course.
But the plaice was there. I mean, and at one time we used to, well, I think I've already told you this, southeast of Gazoon, we used to get the odd turbots.
Yeah.
And the heaviest turbot I've seen come from there was 16 pound. And I know that because the bloke who was with me who caught it.
That's going back a number of years as well.
It's going back to the early 80s.
It's not happened since, has it?
No.
You never hear of them anymore.
No, but I did tell you when I come in contact with you again, when there was catching turbots around Shelley Flat, round the edge of the bank, Shelley Flat Bank, they was getting the odd brill of 8-10 pounders. They was getting the turbot of about 3.5 to 4.5. Each hole they got 2 or 3 fish. And I've got a friend of mine he sailed without Ben actually. He was crewed without Ben, did Dave Wright. And I bet he was making him down the town. I said, how's the fishing going, Dave? And he tells me, and he mentioned about this. That's when I started to get hold of you.
And that's recently, this year?
No, it was about 12 months ago.
Yeah. What about the bass fishing out in the bay? That's more of a recent thing, isn't it?
It is. I'm going back to what I said about the hot water that let out from the nuclear power station. The warm water, millions and millions of gallons. It must make a difference because it's suddenly, and we never had it in my chartering days, and I don't remember ever commercially catching bass, because commercially you can get the odd bass, but with the hot water system, and if you think about the tide coming out of the River Loon and the amount of tide that comes out of the River Wyre, when they release that water, tide that ebbs off, it pushes the tide north. And that's why the roker fishing on the north side of Loon this last couple of years, well, not longer than that, the last 10 or 12 years, it's gone zilch, getting the odd one here and there. I mean, they're getting more roker now down at Rossall. So I've heard. Well, I've heard them on when I have my set switched on.
They reckon that the average temperature in Morecambe Bay, because of the Heysham power station, has gone up by probably about 1 degree, but that's overall.
Exactly.
What you're saying is that although it's gone up on an average of 1 degree, in certain areas it's gone higher, it's concentrated to the north, exactly, where the tide's pushed it, and this is affecting the fishing.
And you know, why suddenly do they catch bass around the prawn buoy? Like I said to you before, I can remember seeing a dozen or 15, 30 foot prawners towing round there, because all you did, you drifted down when you was towing your gear, because we used beam troll in those days with big bobbins, with prawn net, which is very small mesh, and you're getting tackle bags of prawns just in that one area. But the other area, there was an area on the south side of Loon, what we call the south edge, and on the north side of Loon, that's from, we'll say the south side is Kingscar to Shell Wharf and Patch Boy to Loon Boy. In the 12 fathom, we used to sound 12 fathom and tore down on the edge, and they always got good bags of prawns and shrimps.
Well, things have changed.
Yeah, I believe I saw a programme on the telly was about 2 or 3 days ago of a Morecambe who's not catching the prawns and well, the shrimps. They want the shrimps, they don't want the prawn, and he said that the shrimps have not like they used to be. Mind you, plus all the rain that we've had, the rain, and that mixes with the fresh water. When you think of the rivers all the rivers that come down into Morecambe Bay.
Yeah.
It amounts to a lot of water.
And possibly, do you think that the extra rainfall that's occurred over the past sort of several years might that have had an influence on the fishing as well as the temperature?
Yes, I suppose it could have done. Well, you've got to take all these things into consideration sometimes, especially with being like in a place called Morecambe Bay. You've got to think of that, haven't you?
It shouldn't have an effect on the bass though, because bass will actually go into estuaries.
It's the warm water. It's the warm water that the bass have come for.
Yeah.
Solely, that's all it is. Because I can remember in my young days, and especially when I first started charting, very rare did we get any bass round here. The only people that I knew that caught bass fishermen fishing behind number 2 and 4 Buoy, where that mussel bank comes up when the tide ebbs off. They used to get bass there. I've seen blokes walking out bass fishing into the river, especially between Lighthouse and number 4 Buoy. I've always said that with being a bass fisherman, as I was down when I used to fish down at Timoth in South Devon in the 50s and 60s. I always said that the River Wyre would produce some bass at some time or other, but nobody ever used to fish for them like we used to do down there. When I was charting, I didn't worry about bass. I was too interested in roker and plaice and dabs and things like that, you know.
Yeah, that's the bread and butter fishing then.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, I can remember the time talking about cod fishing when they used to catch a lot of cod in Isham Lake. You know where Isham Lake is, don't you?
Yep.
And the 2 boats that used to catch them was my brother Ben and John Cowell in the Lister. Because I've tied alongside John when he's been towing up there and coming back and getting 2 or 3 boxes of cod each haul. And I said, look, I said to the lads, there's the cod. I said, right, and we used to go and drop off an anchor. We couldn't catch him. Why, I don't know, but John caught him in the net. You know, it's strange, what do we got? And I think only once do we ever remember catching cod a good amount. And my brother Ken, when he had his charter boat, he anchored one day off the first buoy into the River Loon, the yellow one. He anchored there and did about 20 odd fish up to 24 pound. And that was the only time, and I was fishing alongside him, but I couldn't catch him, I'll tell you, but he had them.
One of the things that's come on in leaps and bounds, but it's gone in cycles as well, has been the taupe fishing. Was you ever really into the taupe? I don't suppose your anglers were that bothered in those days.
No, not really. I mean,
was you never picking up accidentally, getting bothered by them when you were thrown back in?
Very rare. You'd get one on, but you'd break your line, or your hook was too small.
Yeah. Seems to be a lot of talk about, especially
if you taupe fish properly, you make a good living out of it.
It's actually illegal to kill taupe now.
Is it?
From the 5th of April this year, a law's come in that no boat is allowed to bring taupe into any English and Welsh port.
Oh.
It's not illegal in Scotland yet.
No.
But yeah.
What's the idea of that?
Protection. It's an angling only species now.
Oh.
Which is no bad thing. If it goes on to other species as well to get more protection in for the angling fish.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, I used to throw themselves like you didn't at one time too.
Well, there's enough of them out there at the moment.
Yeah, there must be.
I mean, I fished out with Andy on Blue Mink earlier this year, and no matter what you put down, you couldn't get away from
them. No, they're a bloody nuisance, aren't they?
Well, a nuisance if you don't want to. What about other species of fish? Have you ever come across any unusual fish on your travels? Well, in this area, I mean, when you've been fishing on the charter boats, or even on the commercial boats?
Not really, no, just had just the ordinary taupe, whiting, cod.
I remember it was probably in the 1980s, just for a very brief, maybe a year or 2 years, we made a bit of a run of stingrays off Clevellies as well. And they never came back again. We never heard any more about them.
Yeah. Well, you get this, don't you? Wherever you are fishing, you always get the odd different type of fish that pops up now and again. You know.
One of the things that's amazed me most of all, I went to Heysham Power Station probably in the 1980s, and where the big intakes are, they've got these big drums that catch all the rubbish to stop any rubbish being sucked in, and these drums are full of triggerfish. But nobody ever catches them, and people say, well, it's bound to be full of triggerfish because it's warm water. But when the triggerfish are moving up from cold water, they don't know they're going to find warm water at Morecambe.
Triggerfish, I've never heard of them. What are they?
It's like a flattened fish, like a bream. It's got a very erect spine on its back. You catch them on a long line. You can catch them. They're not easy things to catch, but you can catch them. But nobody's ever caught one, and yet the intakes at Heysham are full of them.
Oh.
That's bizarre.
Triggerfish, I've never heard of them.
You've not?
No, I haven't. No, I'll be honest with you.
What about black bream?
Oh, black bream, yeah. Oh.
One or two of them are showing off here as well.
So I believe. So I believe,
And
yeah.
Andy's picking up a few. He's not had a lot.
No.
Particularly off the bottom end of Walney, but he's
Yeah.
picking a few up. There's a few off Rossall.
Yeah.
I've never had one yet. But
No, no.
anyway, what do you think of the future for angling off the Lancashire coast? What do you think it's got in store for us?
Well, we'll always have fishing. That's obvious, that. We'll always have fishing. And the main fish like cod, whiting, plaice, dabs, flounders and taupe, that we've just been talking about, the odd black bream and other fish that you don't, like turbot and things, we'll always have them. When I'm talking about fishing, I've always found that your best fishing, like cod fishing, is always on 30-foot tides as against 24, 25-foot tides. And the fishing from about 25, 26 foot up, if you can manage to hold bottom, is always good. Always has been, and it always will be around here.
Many thanks for that, Frank. A fascinating insight into some of the history behind the rod and line fishing scene along the Lancashire coast, with a wealth of experience possibly never to be repeated, and more certainly that money could never buy.